Hi, good morning. We're at Living Web Farms today. We're with Hugh Lovel, and I would say Hugh is a pioneer of biodynamic farming. And what I really love about Hugh is he mixes or brings in the science and soil biology into biodynamics. So it's not just kind of woo-woo and hard to get, but he really brings it home. We're here today at our newest farm at Living Web. It's about maybe 30 acres, and we're really struggling with soil health out here. You can see it in the plants, and that's why we got Hugh out here today. So Hugh has a whole take on soil test, which differs from the standard soil test. What's the difference between the total soil test and the soluble soil test, Hugh?
Well, the total soil test, which more technically is a total acid digest with aqua regia, which is a concentrated solution of hydrochloric and nitric acid. And it's more of a mining kind of test, what they do in the mining industry. And that way they can tell, do I have a little gold here, or do I have, these various different things in very small proportions, because the amount of copper or the amount of molybdenum that is needed in the soil is very small. Like molybdenum, I think on only one of the soil tests done here was as much as 1 part per million in the soil. So some of these things need to be present only in just tiny amounts, and some of them, particularly silicon in the soil, is hardly soluble at all, and it's one of the major, most important nutrients in the soil. So silica is everywhere in everything that's made of sand or made of clay. Then it's very rich in silica. But silica is the basis of capillary action in plants and in animals too, for that matter. So the circulation of nutrients in the plant is dependent on silica. And if the plant can't get its silica out of the soil because it's not soluble, then it struggles to move its sap around in the plant so that it doesn't take up sap very well, and then it doesn't feed its sap back to the soil biology very well either. So silica is very, very important. Now, in looking out across the field, I see something that really, it tells us that color in the field. It tells us this whole field is unable to get enough magnesium in the leaf to make chlorophyll to where the plants get dark green. You can see, though, that you just look at the clover over here and see how dark green it is.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's the right color. The sorghum and other plants in this field didn't get their magnesium, but the chlorophyll is present in the clover, because the clover is able to bring oxygen into the soil in the form of organic acids. And it's excreting acids around its roots, and the pH around its roots would be down there around 4. And that unlocks the magnesium in the soil. And so it's able to get its magnesium, but the pH around the roots of the sorghum and other grasses out here would be up there around 6.5. It's almost neutral. And it doesn't unlock the magnesium in the soil at all. It doesn't really hardly affect it. So it's not able to get its magnesium out of the soil, and the soil biology, which otherwise would be a reservoir of lots of magnesium, it isn't very much alive. There's not very good soil biology in the field. So sulfur, which starts out as being the key element that kicks all the rest of the activity into gear,
And don't you call that in your book, what do you call sulfur? The ignition switch?
Yeah,
You make
it's
the
like
analogy with a car.
It's like if you had a key and you put it in the ignition switch and turned it on, that would start the whole show going. And that's what sulfur does. Sulfur works on the surfaces of things, and it's at the surfaces of the soil particles that silica is available. So without sulfur working in the soil, you don't get silica. And if you don't get silica, you don't get magnesium, you don't get calcium, you don't have any of the nitrogen and other activities working. I would say you don't have much, because it's inaccurate to say you don't have any. You'd have to actually kill all of the biology in the soil. It's not an easy thing to do, in order to shut down everything. So there'd be a little activity, but not nearly enough to grow a proper cover crop.
Yeah, we're really struggling with our cover crops here. The first part of the field, you can really see it. It gets a little bit better towards the end, but it's way off in the far corner there. It's a little bit better. I just want to ask, to you, you know, I think it's easier to jump to the how, like how do we do stuff and what's it mean, but it's kind of backing up, it's the why. It's always the why question. Why is biodynamics important? Why do you think we need it? Why have you fought so hard and pioneered it so long?
Well, first of all, it doesn't take a genius to see that waging war on nature, which is what modern agriculture is invested in doing, is bound to fail. Nature has infinite resources and infinite patience, and no matter what we do, nature is going to win. So we see here, we see the fleabane, it's called a weed. We see the dock, which is a weed that is telling us the soil is oxygen deficient. And waterlogged, and you see the marsh grasses and so on and so forth. All of those things that we consider weeds, because they're not what we would like to see there.
Sure.
And we look at that and we think, oh, well, but it's nature is showing us what we're capable of growing. It's growing really well, whereas the cover crop isn't. Well, there's something going on there that these plants are thriving under those conditions and not the plants that we want. And so in order to change that, we have to have a much better understanding of nature. If we just go in there with a big tractor, plow it up and get some oxygen into the soil, and in that process, we're killing off large portions of the soil biology, and then when we do that and we have insects and diseases and all these kinds of things which are nature's indicators that we're not doing the right things. And instead of listening to the message, we shoot the messenger, and we think we're so smart we're going to overpower nature with all our chemistry and our machinery and fossil fuels and everything else, and agriculture is hitting the wall. Well, not any surprise. That's not a surprise. We can't, as a civilization, we cannot continue this way. It can't be done.
I agree.
Modern agriculture is killing us.
Yeah.
And we see herbicide, that means kill, insecticide, that's kill, and fungicide, it's all about killing.
Yeah.
Well, how are we going to live in an environment that we're killing? It just makes no sense. You talked about putting the science to the subject. Modern agriculture does not put the science to the subject. In 1971, I took soil microbiology as part of my biochemistry curriculum. In 32 students in the class, we did not have a single ag major. Nobody in the ag program was taking soil microbiology.
Wow.
You can't hardly think of a course that would be more informative for modern farmers than soil microbiology. I didn't think I was going to become a farmer back then. I wanted to become a biochemist. Well, biochemists have to know about life as well as chemistry, and so I took this course in soil microbiology because it was a great course in life. It's really hard to kill the soil, folks. You can autoclave your soil sample for hours and then incubate it and something grows.
Amazing.
And so you autoclave it again and again and again, and every time you incubate it and something grows, and it takes you 8 or 10 times to get a soil killed dead enough that nothing grows when you incubate it anymore. It's hard to kill. And we're really working on it with hammer and tongs. It's just amazing. So even though we haven't defeated nature utterly, we're making a good run at it.
So
and it just doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense.
We're not going to get like vitality out of food that we're growing in a dead environment.
Yeah, we're killing ourselves one spoon, one fork at a time, it seems like.
Oh, and we're doing it even faster because, like I mentioned earlier, my wife is a survivor of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which currently Monsanto sold out to Bayer to get rid of the legal liability of paying these victims of non-Hodgkin lymphoma, where they've lost billions of dollars worth of lawsuits. It's like, oh, it's killing us because it's killing us directly, even if we do eat dead food.
Yeah.
It's like, one of the secrets to her cure, which is a word that the medical profession doesn't really allow us to use, but her remission of her non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, one of the secrets is a weed that grows here and a lot of other places called poke. Mm-hmm. I see it right over there. Yeah. There is a big tall poke plant, and it's probably the best of all herbal remedies for lymphoma. It's the lymphatic cleanser of the herbal, like pharmacopoeia. And it had a major role in her surviving non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. She was in her early 20s when she found she had this disease. She's now had 3 children and 4 husbands, and
amazing.
She's not given up yet.
No,
and I don't think she's,
for sure.
Yeah, I don't think she's going to give up anytime soon. She's amazing.
She's a firecracker, yeah.
Yeah,
I appreciate her and her
but
energy.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing we're doing to our society. And we can't do that kind of agriculture. It doesn't matter what it is that we have to do. We have to cooperate with nature.
Cooperation's the key, yeah.
And if we're going to cooperate with nature, we have to learn how nature works. And there's a lot of science to it. The whole idea of studying soil microbiology, I found out that there are thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of different microbes that fix nitrogen. And we're spending the most money on nitrogen inputs in agriculture of anything in our budgets. And it's 80% of the atmosphere, 78% to be more technical. Yeah. But it's the most abundant element on every farm. And we're paying for it. We go to the store and buy it. And in nature, it's free. in our rainforests and our prairies and our undisturbed soils that are very fertile on the planet, they never had a bit of this nitrogen fertilizer. They didn't need it. So it's our job to understand what nature's telling us. Nature is an open book. When I see buttercup, I know the soil's waterlogged, along with, of course, dock. They go together. It's like nature just tells me that. It's apparent. It's like you learn what nature is telling you. We're shooting the messenger when we should be paying attention. It's incredible. I can't believe our society is so determined on its self-destruction. Anyway, I don't endorse that, and I've been trying to find out how nature works and to find out how to grow food and everything else that we need without all of that war on nature.
How'd you get into biodynamics, though? How'd you go from soil science to biodynamics?
Well, biodynamics, by its definition, the word bio means life, and dynamics means activities, processes. So we're working in biodynamics on life processes. It's all about life processes. And biodynamics is kind of obscure because it's using things like a cow horn to pack manure or powdered quartz into and burying it for a whole 6 months to resonate in that horn to be transformed into something really dynamic and really bio. And that doesn't explain how it works. And you think, oh, well, these people are nuts. They're packing these cow horns full of manure and burying them in the soil, and they expect that to do something. You put like a quarter of a cup, something you could hold in your hand like that, into water and stirring it up intensively and sprinkling that on an acre, and you expect that to do something? Well, this is the way with life. If you saw the egg and sperm of a sperm whale, you'd have to have a microscope to see it. And yet, it becomes the biggest creature in the ocean. Because life is dynamic, life is processes, and life can take something that is absolutely super microscopic and develop it into something that is really huge. And that's life, because life is a process. Life grows. It's like, this is something we studiously turn our backs on and fail to investigate. It's like, it just boggles my mind. Sure, I had scientific training. When I got into biodynamics, that scientific training gave me the language to talk about these things to other scientists. And you can go in dictionaries, if you can find these things in dictionaries, and sometimes you have to have a special dictionary of chemical terms or something, but you go in dictionaries and find a definition, and it's a definition that works for anybody anywhere in the world. So we got a means to communicate about these things. So I get told that I take a scientific approach to biodynamics. Well, I guess I do. But to me, science is the process of defining the limits of what we know in order to exceed them. Science is a process of discovery. Science is a process of knowing with as great a degree of certainty as we can possibly obtain. And I don't know, I reckon that Donald Trump is a scientist when it comes into understanding people's emotions and how to motivate people so that they'll vote for you in utter blind trust.
Yeah, well, that's what science has led us. with agriculture.
And he might not be able to put that in any kind of formal language and print it in a journal. But boy, he's a master of it. He's really got people engaged in backing him up. And that's true, I think, of every politician. They have to know what it is that motivates people. In the advertising industry, and several friends of mine are advertising psychologists, and they engineer their advertising programs in order to get people motivated.
Do you think Biodynamics has done a bad job at advertising? What's the deal?
It's done a poor job of communicating because it presents itself as something mysterious. Well, the gravel on this road is mysterious, but we don't think of it that way. We think it's obvious it's gravel. Its origins way back in the beginnings of like pre-solar system, they're mysterious. Look, I worked on oil rigs out in the Gulf of Mexico in order to buy property that I could farm. And here I am out on the oil rigs, and one of the geologists on the oil rigs, we had a couple geologists, and they mentioned to me, I bet you think that petroleum is a fossil fuel. And I said, well, that's what I learned in school. You know, petroleum's a fossil fuel. But they said, but it isn't. I said, well, what is it then? They said, we believe currently, this was back in the 1970s, or early 1980s, sorry. But they believed that we were on an oil rig at that time that was drilling at deeper than 28,000 feet. That's below 5 miles deep. And there's plenty of oil down there. We were drilling and drilling, big oil rig, big derrick. It has to be a big derrick to lift that many miles of pipe back out of the hole. And there's plenty of oil down there, but we're reaching the limit of how far we can drill to get it. Well, we were down in strata below any sedimentary deposits. Fossils, they were up there in the sedimentary deposits, but we were down below the limestone blocks and all that sort of stuff and drilling into deeper territory, and there was plenty of oil. Because they believe that carbon in the early formation of the earth, carbon was drawn into almost the center of the earth, so that it was a big component in the earth's mantle, let alone the earth's crust. So down there in the earth's mantle, in the absence of oxygen, but the presence of hydrogen, by far the most abundant element in the universe, then it, under that pressure and temperature, it created hydrocarbons, and they bubbled up from the mantle of the earth into fracture zones in the earth's crust. And that's where we were drilling for oil. And we don't really know how much oil's down there. There have been oil wells that were capped off because it was no longer economical to produce oil. Now they've got oil again because it's been bubbling up from the Earth's interior.
Amazing.
So we don't really know. It's not like coal, which is definitely a deposit.
A deposit from
that was, you know, it originated at the surface and it's gotten buried. But petroleum apparently was part of the original formation of the earth, and it became petroleum in the heat and pressure down there deep within the earth. So our assumptions back when I was a kid going to school and Shell Oil Company had produced a lot of films for kids, then we thought maybe that petroleum came from mollusks, Shell Oil Company. Well, apparently
So
not.
you're saying we're basing our science on misconceptions?
Science is always correcting itself.
Sure.
And that's because science finds out things that require it to change its assumptions. We assume a lot of things in science. It's not good science. Our observations are great. We're seeing what's there. We've gotten really amazing at that. But our hypotheses about those observations are all over the place, and many of them are wrong. And our hypotheses that underlie the so-called science of modern chemical agriculture are way out of line. They are ever so wrong. And it's just by virtue of the fact that there's so much money and so much momentum behind conventional agriculture that it hasn't stopped. It's doing its best. You know, the asbestos industry hid the evidence that asbestos caused mesothelioma. They hid that evidence for 50 years before it finally came out in court. And when they lost those court cases, then they went bankrupt and didn't pay the damages and reorganized their companies, and they're back in business again. It's like...
It's a shame. Well, we see that over and over with the agricultural companies.
Well, we're going to see a lot more of it in agriculture because we have really screwed things up.
Can you talk about...
Okay, let's move positions.
Yeah.